We thank Peg Howell for her remarks. Where'd Nina go? Nina here? I'm right here. No. Nina Turner. Come on out here, Nina. Nina, all of you know Senator Nina Turner, and she is the soul of our campaign. She is the intellect of our campaign. She's the energy of our campaign. And she's the reason we're going to win right here in South Carolina. It's a great turnout. I want to thank all of you for coming out tonight. And the subject that we're going to be talking about in a minute is the global crisis of climate change. But before I get there, I wanted to say a few words about what this campaign is about, because I want you to know what you're getting into. And what you are getting into is a campaign that I believe is going to win here in South Carolina. It is a campaign that is going to win the Democratic nomination. And it is a campaign with your help that is going to defeat the most dangerous president in the modern history of this country. But, see, that's what other candidates would say as well. Now I'm going to tell you why this campaign is different. Because I am going to ask for your help the day after we are inaugurated. Because the message of our campaign is us, not me. And what that means is that if we are serious, and we are, about not only defeating Trump, but transforming this country so that we have an economy and a government that works for all of us and not just the 1%, If we are going to do that, we need millions of people from coast to coast to stand up to the greed and the corruption of the corporate elite. And that is what this campaign is about. It's about understanding, and I'm the only candidate who will tell you this. It is understanding that no president, not Bernie Sanders or anybody else, can do it alone. Because the nature of the power structure of this country is that you have multinational corporations. You got Wall Street, you got the insurance companies, you got the pharmaceutical industry, you got the fossil fuel industry, you got the military industrial complex, you got the prison industrial complex, you got the entire 1%. And these guys have enormous wealth and they have enormous power. But at the end of the day, they are just 1%. And if we in the 99% stand up, fight back, and stop their greed and corruption, there is no end to what we can accomplish. So what this campaign is about is dealing with issues that no other candidate will deal with. What we are saying is that it's not acceptable that we have more income and wealth inequality in America today than at any time since the 1920s. We will not accept in America 3 people owning more wealth than the bottom half of American society at the same time as 500,000 Americans are sleeping out on the streets tonight. We will not accept a corrupt political system which allows billionaires to buy elections. That is not our definition of democracy. Our definition of democracy is one person, one vote, and we will put an end not only to Citizens United, but to voter suppression all across this country. Unlike many of my Republican colleagues, we want to see more people engaged in the political process. We want to see young people and working people engaged in the political process. And I say to all of those Republican governors all over this country who are trying to suppress the vote, and that is, if they do not have the guts to participate in free, fair, and open elections, they should get the hell out of politics and get another job. So what this campaign is about is speaking to the issues of a forgotten middle class and a forgotten working class. It is a campaign that is going to bring millions of young people into the political process. It is a campaign that says it is unacceptable to us that many millions of American workers continue to work at starvation wages in South Carolina and all over this country. And let us be clear. Let us be clear. Nobody can make it on $9-10 an hour. You can't take care of yourself, let alone a family. And that is why we will raise that minimum wage to at least $15 an hour. And we will end the absurdity of women making 80 cents on the dollar compared to men. And that ratio is even worse for minority women. Equal pay for equal work. And I know that this will get the elite here in South Carolina a little bit nervous, but we are going to make it easier for workers to join unions and do away with the right to work laws. And what we understand that in the year 2019, the year 2020, it is very hard for young people or anybody to make it into the middle class unless they have a decent education. You know, and what this campaign is about is getting people to think outside the box. Think about where we should be going as a nation. Don't just believe everything they tell you on TV or in the newspapers. We are the wealthiest country in the history of the world. We are not a poor country. So you have to ask yourself, if we're the richest country in the history of the world, why do we have a child care system which is totally inadequate, where working families cannot afford the decent quality child care their kids need? Why do we have here in South Carolina, but in other areas of this country, public education which is not providing the kind of education that our kids need? I want the best and the brightest young people to get into education and teach our kids. And that is why we introduced a public education program called the Thurgood Marshall Plan, which will pay every teacher in this country at least $60,000 a year. And that is why we are going to make public colleges and universities tuition free. And we are going to cancel all student debt in this country. Now, my critics, who are legion, and the editorial pages all over America will say, you can't be done, you can't do it, you're thinking too big, it's very expensive. It is expensive. Our proposal to make public colleges and universities tuition free and cancel all student debt over a 10-year period is about $2.2 trillion. That's a lot of money. But we are going to pay for it through a tax on Wall Street speculation, which raises $2.4 trillion. And what we have got to be thinking about, we got to be asking ourselves, how come it is okay to bail out the crooks on Wall Street 11 years ago who nearly destroyed our economy? How come it is okay under Trump and his friends to give well over $1 trillion in tax breaks to the top 1% and large profitable corporations? If we could bail out Wall Street and give tax breaks to billionaires, we could cancel all student debt in this country. Four years ago, when I came to South Carolina and went around the country, I said that health care is a human right, not a privilege. And I said it's a little bit crazy that America is the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people. And 4 years ago, I was told that that was just a radical idea. Something could never happen. Well, you take a look at the last polls that have been out there. Poll after poll after poll shows that the American people understand that the current healthcare system is dysfunctional. We got 87 million people uninsured or underinsured. We got 30,000 people dying every year because they don't go to a doctor when they should. We got 500,000 people going bankrupt because they've been diagnosed with cancer or heart disease or Alzheimer's disease. In America, you should not have to go bankrupt because you are seriously ill. That is disgraceful. And at the end of all of that, we are spending twice as much per capita on health care as do the people of any other country. But this is what the corruption that we are dealing with right now. Last year, the healthcare industry, those are the drug companies that charge us the highest prices in the world for the medicine that we need, and the healthcare industry and the insurance companies made $100 billion in profit. So what we are here to say is the function of a rational healthcare system is to provide quality care for all, not to make the drug companies and the insurance companies fabulously rich. And that is why we will pass a Medicare for all single-payer system. And when we talk about greed, it's not only the greed of Wall Street and the insurance companies and the drug companies. There is one area where the greed is almost unimaginable. Right now, the debate is over in terms of climate change. Scientists have told us loudly and clearly that climate change is real, it is caused by human activity, it is already doing devastating harm in our country and around the world. But yet, we have an industry, the fossil fuel industry, that makes tens of billions of dollars every single year producing a product that is destroying our planet. We will end that greed, and we will make it very clear to the fossil fuel industry that their short-term profits are not more important than the future of our planet. Now, Donald Trump thinks that climate change is a hoax. I think that Donald Trump is a hoax. Because what the scientists have told us is that if we do not act boldly and aggressively, we will see more floods in the United States and around the world. We will see more drought, more rising sea levels, more extreme weather disturbances, more acidification of the oceans, more famine, more disease, and more human suffering. We have a moral obligation to make certain that the planet we leave our kids and our grandchildren is a planet that is healthy and is habitable. Now, my critics are telling me, they say, Bernie, the plan you released to combat climate change, which, by the way, is the most comprehensive plan ever released by anybody, and they say that that plan is expensive. And I say, you're right, it is expensive. But I also say that the cost of doing nothing will be far, far more expensive. The economists have told us that the cost of inaction on climate change will cost some $69 trillion throughout the globe. The scientists have told us that the cost of inaction on climate will put the entire planet and life as we know it on Earth in serious jeopardy. Because what we have been told is that if we do nothing, the effects of climate change will lead to the deaths of hundreds and hundreds of thousands of innocent men, women, and children across the globe every single year from factors such as malnutrition, heat stress, malaria, and other diseases. If we do nothing, which is the president's prescription for this crisis, if we do nothing, what we have been told is that the effects of climate change will throw over 100 million people throughout the world into extreme poverty. People will not have land to till their crops. They will not have drinking water to stay alive. If we do nothing, the World Bank has told us that the effects of climate change could result in the mass migration and displacement of more than 140 million people throughout the world by 2050. What that means is when people don't have food, they don't have water, they're going to pick up, they're going to leave, they're going to go into somebody else's area. And when that happens, what the Department of Defense and the other intelligence agencies tell us, that is a recipe for international crisis. According to a recent report, 500 million people throughout the world already live in places that are turning into deserts, where the soil is being lost up to 100 times faster than it is forming. If we do nothing, the CIA and the other intelligence agencies have warned us that the effect of heat waves, droughts, and floods substantially increase the risk of war. Donald Trump says that climate change is not a serious issue. Well, let me respectfully disagree with our all-genius president, who has recently told us that he knows a great deal about the environment as well as everything else. So I say to the president, this last June and July were the warmest months in history, in recorded history. In fact, the last 5 years were the warmest on record. The Centers for Disease Control has found that as a result of extreme heat events, quote, the most prominent cause of weather-related human mortality in the U.S., that's what heat waves are, responsible for more deaths annually than hurricanes, lightning, tornadoes, floods, and earthquakes combined. In other words, as the planet becomes warmer, people, especially the elderly and the children, will be vulnerable to to disease and stroke as a result of those heat waves. Right here in South Carolina, more than 160,000 people are already vulnerable to extreme heat. If we do not get our act together, the number of dangerously hot days here in South Carolina, where the heat index is 100 degrees or higher, is estimated to jump from 14 days a year to 64 days a year in 2050 and 97 days a year by the end of the century. And that is obviously not only a danger for human health, it will have a very significant impact on agriculture here in South Carolina and all over the country. What would it be like to live in a state where it feels like it is over 100 degrees outside for more than 3 months out of the year? Today, the people of South Carolina already spend more on electric bills. That true? You guys paying a lot in electricity? All right, you spend more per household than any other state in the country because you have to keep your air conditioners running and running and running. Well, when you get more and more 100-degree days, that is going to be more and more expensive electricity. How much more will South Carolinians have to pay in electric bills if the temperature outside feels like 100 degrees or higher for more than 2 or 3 months a year? How many people will die because they cannot afford to turn on their air conditioner? And let me tell you something about rising sea levels. The EPA has warned that, quote, if the oceans and atmosphere continue to warm, the sea level is likely to rise 1 to 4 feet in the next century along the coast of South Carolina. You got that? 1 to 4 feet in the next century along the coast of South Carolina, putting more homes and more residents at risk of coastal flooding and putting the entire tourism industry at risk. The Post-Courier has reported that more than half of South Carolina's shoreline is already eroding under an onslaught of rising seas, pounding storms, and other scouring forces, end of quote. What does that mean? It means that today more than 1 out of every 6 homes in Charleston are at risk of flooding. In Hilton Head, more than 1 out of every 4 homes are at risk of flooding. And what the scientists are telling us is that if we do not act boldly and transform our energy system away from fossil fuel, Charleston could experience flooding for over half of the year due to a 2.5-foot rise in the sea level. And let us be clear, the scientists have also told us that the warmer air and warmer oceans will lead to more intense hurricanes and more extreme weather disturbances. Last year, Hurricane Florence dumped a record-breaking 6 months of rain on South Carolina and North Carolina over the course of just a few days, making it the wettest tropical system to ever strike the East Coast. National Geographic reported that Hurricane Florence's rains were, quote, more than 50% worse than it would have been without global warming, end of quote. And here is what is so incredible. The records Florence broke were only a couple of years old. In 2016, Hurricane Matthew also caused devastating floods along the coast of South Carolina. And these, of course, were only a couple of hurricanes that hit the United States. Since 2000, the top 10 natural disasters in this country, including Hurricanes Katrina, Harvey, Maria, and Sandy, caused over $660 billion in damage and over 5,500 deaths. That is what is already happening. And what the scientists say, if we don't get our act together, it will only become worse. We have a choice right now, and that is we can listen to the ignorance of Donald Trump and his supporters who tell us that climate change is not real, or maybe if it is real, there is nothing we can or should do about it. That is one of the options. We can look at another option where people say, well, yeah, climate change is real, I know that, but I just don't think we can afford to really invest in combating climate change and doing what has to be done. Or thirdly, as we are doing, we listen to the scientists and do what has to be done in order to save this planet for future generations. The plan that I have introduced is the most comprehensive climate change platform of any candidate who has ever run for president of the United States. Under our plan, we will transform our energy system away from fossil fuels and towards energy efficiency and renewable sources of energy. And we will pay for it. We will pay for it by eliminating fossil fuel subsidies and making big oil companies pay their fair share of taxes. Unbelievably, we as a nation today are spending over $645 billion a year to subsidize the coal, oil, and gas industry. Under our administration, those tax breaks, those subsidies are over. Last year, as a result of Trump's tax giveaway to the wealthy, not only did 24 fossil fuel companies pay nothing in federal income taxes, they actually received a $2 billion tax refund from the IRS after making $38 billion in profits. That is pretty crazy. So you got people who are destroying the planet, who don't pay any taxes, and then they get a tax refund. Under our administration, we are going to do exactly the opposite. We will end those tax giveaways and subsidies and substantially raise taxes on the companies that are destroying our planet. And when we do that, we are not just going to meet the recommendations of climate scientists by moving to 100% renewable energy for electricity and transportation by 2030 and decarbonizing our economy by 2050. We are also going to move to a full employment economy and create up to 20 million good-paying jobs. We will build the new electric cars and high-speed rail systems that we need. And when we talk about electric cars, they're going to be affordable for everybody, not just the wealthy. We will be weatherizing millions of homes and buildings. We will be rebuilding our nation's infrastructure and we will be generating big-time sustainable energy. Under our plan, we will be making an historic $16.3 trillion investment in sustainable energy like wind turbines and solar panels, manufacturing, infrastructure, and research. A beautiful state like South Carolina, which is blessed with an incredible amount of sun. This state should be leading the country in solar energy. And despite what the fossil fuel industry may want you to believe, the reality is that solar and wind are already cheaper than coal. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. We will also invest in efficiency so that we are getting the most out of the energy we are generating. That means building a resilient, secure, and energy-efficient smart grid. It means requiring that new construction and existing commercial buildings meet tough energy efficiency and electrification standards, and it means aggressively weatherizing homes and businesses in a way that will let us reduce residential energy consumption by up to 30%. Now, I'm not here to tell you that any of this is going to be easy. We have to take on the very powerful fossil fuel industry. We have to take on Wall Street, and we have to take on all of the entities that today make huge profits as they destroy our planet. And I want to talk to you about power, not electric power here, but what political power is about. In the last decade alone, the fossil fuel industry has spent more than $700 million on campaign contributions. Got that? And now you know why in Congress and state legislatures you don't have people standing up to them. They have also spent over $1.5 billion on lobbying to get politicians in Washington to do their bidding and to cast doubt on climate change. Brothers and sisters, make no mistake about it. In this fight to combat climate change, failure is not an option. And what our effort is about is to making sure that 20, 30, 40 years ago, your kids and your grandchildren do not look you in the eye and say, Mom or Dad or Grandma or Grandpa, you knew what was happening way back in 2019 and 2020. You read what the scientists were telling us. Why didn't you do the right thing? Why didn't you give us a planet that is healthy and habitable? And I don't want anybody here tonight to have to look your grandchild or your kids in the eye and say, I'm sorry, we failed you. Now is the time for us to stand up to the fossil fuel industry. Now is the time to transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. Now is the time to save the one planet that we have. Thank you all very much. Okay, what we'd like to do now, I'm happy to try, we got a couple of microphones or not? We do? All right, we got a mic. Where are the mics? Please raise your hand. We got a staffer over here. Where's the other staffer? Have anybody on this side? All right, let's start on over here. Okay, thank you. Okay. Yep, it is. Okay, great. Okay, Let's start off. Anybody questions over here? Okay, we got a gentleman right there, sir.
Hello.
Yeah, give him the mic. Good.
Hello, Senator Sanders. Good
Hi.
evening. How are you doing tonight?
Great.
Alrighty, sir. I have a question for you. There is a growing debate between the inviolable sovereignty of countries and the stake that every nation has in this world with regards to climate change and the environment. With President Bolsonaro's declination of international aid from France over the Amazon fires, do you support economic sanctions, interventionist foreign policy, and to some extent, boots on the ground over extreme ecological and climate crises outside the borders of the United States?
No, I don't support a military intervention. That I think we've learned what that is about. But this is what I do support. What Bolsonaro in Brazil, who is, a lookalike for Donald Trump, actually. What they are doing is unbelievable. You're all aware of that. They're in the process of burning the rainforests, which are the lungs of our entire planet. So without going into great detail, let me just say this. Climate change is not a South Carolina issue. It's not a Vermont issue. It's not an American issue. It is a global issue. And instead of having a president who thinks climate change is a hoax, you will have a president that will lead the effort to bring countries all over the world together to combat climate change. Now, I may be doing a little bit of wishful thinking when I say this, but maybe, just maybe, if we make governments all over the world aware of the severity of the crisis, maybe, just maybe, that instead of spending $1.5 trillion every year on weapons of destruction, maybe we can pool our resources and fight our common enemy, which is climate change.
Hi, Bernie. I'm Britta. They,
Hi.
them.
Hold that mic close to your mouth.
Okay. 1 second while I get my question. Okay. So, as you probably know, animal agriculture is to blame for the majority of climate change and is the leading cause of deforestation, water and air pollution, and biodiversity loss. With that being known, what do you plan on doing to ensure that Americans limit their consumption of animal products? Second part, Germany has imposed a meat tax in hopes of limiting this consumption. What are your plans to stop these large corporations from further usurping natural resources and polluting the planet?
All right. Thank you for the question, and it's a good question. All I can say is if we believe, as I do and you do, that climate change is real, we're going to have to tackle it in every single area, including agriculture. Okay, and in fact, one of the things we want to do with our farmers out there is help them become more aggressive and able to help us combat climate change rather than contribute to it. So we will certainly, you're right, we got to look at agriculture, we've got to look at every cause of the crisis that we face. Okay, we got a question over here. Anyone got a question over there? All right, we got a woman right here. Oh, you got one right there. Okay, good.
If you would speak to campaign finance reform, it's my understanding that congressmen can't get appointed to major committees unless they raise a certain amount of money. And of course that lends to lobbyists having more influence in Washington. What's your plan regarding
Well, I'll tell you what my plan is. Thank you very much. Because when we talk about the deregulation of Wall Street, when you talk about why you pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs, why we are the only major country on earth not to have a national health care program, you talk about climate change, you are implicitly talking about a corrupt political system, all right? Absolutely. And it's hard to imagine that we go forward effectively unless we address that. So what do we do briefly? Number one, we have got to do everything we can to overturn this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision. And if you want to take money out of politics, the best way that I know how to do that is move to public funding of elections. And what that means What that means is if you want to run for office, you don't have to cozy on up to some millionaire or billionaire. If you show you have strength, you can get public funding and we can have real debates about ideas and not simply have candidates do the work of the wealthy in this country. Okay, hold that mic close to your mouth.
Hi, Senator Sanders. My name is Cassie Ratliff, and I live here along the Grand Strand. As you know, last year, some of our local communities here in Horry County were devastated by flooding in the wake of Hurricane Florence. Many of us are very concerned and wondering how we will continue to recover as we face more powerful storms like Florence due to climate change. In your $16 trillion plan for America, how will you ensure that communities like ours, who are most vulnerable to climate impacts, will be able to take advantage of the financial opportunities we desperately need to recover?
Okay, well, two things. Obviously, long term, the goal is to combat climate change so that we do not see the kind of extreme weather disturbances that we're seeing right now. Short term, communities like yours are going to need help. And in our program, there are billions and billions of dollars to help communities become more resilient in combating the extreme weather disturbances that we're going to see. So to answer your question, not only that, we're sitting here and you're talking about storms. Last week, I was in Paradise, California. You remember what happened in Paradise? That was a community that burned down. 86 people died. We're also going to provide the kind of support that firefighters and the folks who are on the front line of fighting these extreme weather disturbances need. So to answer your question, in that legislation, there are billions of dollars to help communities fight back against what is happening and helping them to rebuild.
Senator Sanders, we have a board of governors because there are so many checks that get passed around this very wealthy country. Somebody a long time ago decided it should be well organized. We have a president currently in the White House who wants to be the president forever. Senator Sanders, I'm asking you if you would consider being our our last president, there's the microphone, our last president, and in that presidency establish a system where less people have to pay attention to one person in the White House who can't do his job because his job is too big.
Okay, I think I understand the question. Look, there's no question, number one, you have a current president who apparently, despite his self-proclaimed genius, I think has not read the Constitution of the United States and doesn't understand the separation of powers, and the role of media, and so forth and so on. But I think there is no question that the problems we face as a nation are so huge, obviously no one person can do it. And one of the things that I want to see happen, and what we will strive for under our administration, is to decentralize power all over this country, to give working people the power to help make decisions locally. So, I understand your question, and let me also say, if I might, that a Bernie Sanders administration will look like America. It will reflect the diversity of America. I know that there will be at least one old white guy there, but I suspect most of the others will not be. So, okay, ma'am.
Senator, it's an honor and a privilege to address you. I worked hard all my life, a single mother, raised 3 children, was a volunteer Girl Scout leader, the whole 9 yards. Became disabled. I get under $800 a month. Have been homeless when I went from a 4-bedroom house. Had to come from Michigan, where I went from New Jersey to Michigan, and then met a stranger on Facebook who opened up her home to me, and I used my last money to get a U-Haul, actually put me overdrawn, to get here, hoping for the best, and luckily it worked. But what do people like me, what do we have to expect? It's frightening. Everything about the future, to me, it is worrisome, anxiety-ridden.
What's your name? First name is?
It's Heidi.
Heidi. Did everyone hear Heidi? All right. Heidi's story is not a unique story. You got a half of older workers in America, Heidi. You know how much money they have in the bank as they approach retirement? Zero. You got, Trump talks about a booming economy. Half of the people in this country are working paycheck to paycheck. And some of them are right here. Which means that if their car breaks down, they can't get to work because they don't have the money to fix it. And they don't get to work, they don't get a paycheck, they don't pay the rent, and they're out on the street. All right? So the truth is that today in America, like Heidi, there are tens of millions of people who are struggling. And Heidi, without going into all the details, what our administration will be about is protecting people like you, working people, rather than the 1% and the billionaire class. So what does that mean? It means that we'll build millions of affordable units of housing so that we don't have 500,000 people sleeping out on the street. We will combat gentrification so that working people are not thrown out of their homes. We're going to guarantee health care to everybody as a human right through Medicare for all. And we're going to expand Social Security so that the check you get will be a little bit more generous. And we will tell the wealthy and the powerful that they are going to start paying their fair share of taxes. Okay, I think maybe two more questions. One here, and that'll be it. Yes, sir.
All right, so just
hold that mic close to your mouth.
Gotcha. First of all, thank you so much for coming to Myrtle Beach.
Thank you.
I nearly jumped out of my seat when I first heard about you coming to Myrtle Beach. And for my question, I didn't originally intend to ask you anything, but as I see some of my fellow students at my school sitting around here, it made me thinking, because you talk a lot about college students in America. So, for example, free public college,
Yep.
And canceling of student debt. But as a 16-year-old in high school, I am obviously quite concerned with pre-secondary education. And I want to know, one, specifically, how would you help make that better in the United States? And two, what can we do as students to utilize our unique opportunity to make the world a better place?
Well, I don't want to get you too nervous, but the future of this country and the world depend upon your generation, all right? My generation has failed you, and your generation is going to have to pick up the damage that we have left you and go forward. All right, so what does that mean? It means, for a start, we need to significantly increase the number of young people involved in the political process. You're too young to vote now, but you can work on campaigns. We'd love you to work on our campaign. If young people in this country voted at the same percentage rate as older people, we would transform this nation. All right? So get the word out. Get the word out to people your age and older. Get the word out that you're tired of hearing them complain about the low-wage jobs they have, tired of hearing them telling you they can't afford to go to college, they're going to leave school deeply in debt, tired of them telling you about their concerns about racism or climate change or whatever it may be. Tell them that instead of complaining, they're going to have to get their hands dirty and get involved in the political process. And I am happy to say that your generation is already making significant differences in terms of gun safety, legislation. Your generation is helping to lead that effort. And in terms of climate change. So let's keep it up. You're doing good.
Hi, Senator Sanders. I'm a local geography professor here in Myrtle Beach, and I just wanted to give my friends and neighbors here in Myrtle Beach an idea of what 2 to 4 feet sea level is. We are, by 2050...
Excuse me, I'm going to interrupt you. This is a geography professor at...
Horry Georgetown Technical College.
Okay, Georgetown.
Horry Georgetown.
All right.
By the year 2050, where you're standing will be the high tide watermark. By 2050.
Did everybody hear that? Get close to that mic and say it again.
By my observation and calculations, you are standing right at the high tide watermark by 2050 here in Myrtle Beach.
Okay. Well, that is a little bit scary, isn't it? All right. Let me just conclude by thanking all of you for coming out to say this. But thank you. This is, the challenges that we face are enormous. We don't have the luxury of throwing our arms up in despair or getting depressed. We can save the planet. We can transform our economy and government. We can do all of that if we are prepared to stand up and fight back, and that is what this campaign is about. Thank you all very much for being here.